I found a better way to explain how to mix colors for your midtones, thanks in large part to your responses from my previous video about warm objects and cool lighting and cool objects and warm lighting. Your questions and feedback are helping me be a better artist and teacher, and hopefully this video will bless all of you in turn. If you haven't seen the previous video illustrating the problem, then you can watch that, but this video also stands alone as a way to figure out how to mix colors with the technical understanding required to apply this into any kind of work. The color of any typical object will be determined by two factors: what the object is made out of and the color of the light. What the object is made of could also be called the local color, which describes the color of something under normal, neutral light. Under neutral lighting, we get to see the full spectrum of colors. When it comes to light, white is all colors together. So under white lighting, we can see the richest of reds and the richest of blues. But if the color of the light is red, then that doesn't mean that the light has more red in it. It actually means that it's missing blue and green. And if the light is blue, then it's missing red and green. So for these midtones under neutral lighting, we can see a rich red and a rich blue under the same light, because the light can pick up both reds and blues. And so it's under this lighting that we can say that the colors are most vivid in the midtones. But under warm lighting, which would be a combination of red and green, a little bit on the red side in this case, we see the same rich red color, but we no longer see a vivid blue because the color of the light is missing blue. It can't pick up the blues very well. So this explains why we see these desaturated midtones in cool objects in warm light. They're desaturated as they relate to these colors, which can be more easily picked up by the light. And as I said in my previous video, the color, the hue of the light tends to be most visible in these midtones, which is why we're even seeing how these midtones can lean towards red in the absence of blue, right? Like I didn't just blend these two colors together. It makes more sense when it actually leans towards warm, towards the color of the light. Under cool lighting, we see the same thing, but with reds. And we still have some red in here, so the color of the light might be somewhere in here as opposed to way over here or over here. We're still seeing some red wavelengths being captured here, just not as much. So in the midtones, we can still see the highly saturated blue, but because we have a lack of red, look at how gray this midtone is as the color of the light mixes in with the red of the object. It's this grayish purple color, but relatively it appears more blue compared to the red, as the color of the light is tinting the local color most powerfully in the midtone. So all the local colors get affected by the color of the light, but the color of the light is most visible in those midtones. So the easy answer to all this is to figure out what the color of the light is and how much it will tint the colors of the objects that you're painting. If the color of the light is tinting things very strongly, we'll see less of the local color and more of that hue of the light, especially in the midtones, which may or may not affect its saturation. That's the easy way to think about it. Local colors versus the color of the light. If the color of the light tints something very little, like if it's only slightly cool, then we'll see a combination of these two forces, where you can see that, yeah, this is actually yellow, but it's not super yellow. It's actually very gray, but it's still these midtones that betray the actual color of the light. Also, it's a bit of an extreme example. I want to make it clear that the midtone is not necessarily the color of the environment or background. In this case, I set up an example where all of our shadows are blue, but the color of the light is very warm. And so we don't get a blue midtone, we still get a relatively desaturated red, purple, combination of the local color plus the color of the light happening in this midtone, right? Like look at the midtones in this painting. I could easily use any one of these colors for a midtone in this cool lighting scenario, but see how we are changing the hue of the light? So the color of the light is most visible in those midtones. So don't make the mistake of thinking that the midtone color is the color of the background. At the end of this, I changed the color of the background anyways, and it still worked. And then remember, paint the base light and shadow first to capture the impression, and then worry about what goes in between after. Another person commented that you could use a more structured method than the one that I gave previously. Essentially, you can mix a string of values for the local color and then add the appropriate amount of the color of light to tint the colors. Now, in visually explaining this, I think there's some major issues that I need to address. Not necessarily anything wrong with Todd's suggestion, but more of the way that I just did it. So while we are combining these two colors together to make a new mixture, you want to watch to make sure that you're not losing too much saturation. You want to try to have as much color as you possibly can. So what I would do instead is just look at these visually and just ask ourselves, what do we think we should get from this yellowy orange and this greenish blue? Would we go towards purple? Or would we go towards green? And I kind of feel like we'd go towards green. So maybe I can retain some of the green that I think should be there. Now, I'm not going to die on that hill, but I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind that maybe I can add a little bit of green to this so that I can retain the color. Come back to your main color, but also don't forget that you need to go this way as well, because we are moving toward, like, this is actually the fastest path to blue, something like that perhaps. Let's see how I did. That's pretty close. Just kind of doing this manually rather than color picking for this one as well. When we think about what the color of the light would be, it's really going to go towards blue. This neutral is in between, and then I think we can probably get away with going way over here. I'm not sure. Maybe it's going to go down further into a lot more of a neutral. That's too bright of a value, so we're going to bring this down. Something like that seems to be fairly appropriate. How close are we? Okay, we're a little bit off. This is a little bit more green perhaps. But all this to say, I think it needs to be done manually so that you can really retain the richness of your colors rather than actually just smashing these two together. But still, starting with something like this could give you enough of a placeholder to then make your tweaks and get the colors that you need. Because it's really difficult to just look at this color wheel and choose the exact color that you want. Now, when you get to your shadows though, you could also consider making some deviations, because this is the color of the light in value, but we haven't accounted for what the colors of things look like in the absence of light. This is with light, which is why I made this deviant path towards this red. So rather than making a combination of these two colors to get probably a green, I very intentionally deviated away into what's opposite of green and blue, red. So that helps create a clear separation between the light and shadow. And again, by making this red, by making this warm, it's further clarifying that these colors are cool under this cool lighting. And again, the color of the midtones is representative of the temperature of the light. So we see this green because the color of the light is mixing in very strongly with the local colors. And that's how we get this beautiful separation between these two, this being far away from the temperature of the light because it is the absence of that light, and this having the strongest color of that light right there in these midtones. And I feel like this opens up a whole can of worms on additive color mixing, because for painting we use subtractive color mixing, and yet here I am accounting for additive color mixing as it pertains to the light, and the light is influencing all of the colors. So is there a combination of the two? Like, what's going on? I feel like there's a whole video we could do on that, but I have found that the more I pay attention to what's happening on the light side of things, the better my colors get for my paintings. Lastly, I wanted to respond to a question about highlights. Like the midtones, the highlights will also move towards the color of the light, perhaps a bit more strongly than we would see in the base light. I think we could get away with making this more like this. So if I change this color even more dramatically, I could probably put it into the highlights on my figure, and that further helps create a nice color relationship as we're dancing between the color of the light and the local color. Isn't this so cool? Going back to my spheres, you can see how these highlights are actually all slightly different colors based on the color of the light. And I continue to find myself in awe of the light and how good it is. We bring light and life to others through art that convicts and compels and draws us towards truth and beauty. So yeah, just really appreciating these comments and getting to nerd out with all of you about the technicalities of light. I am still doing free critiques, so if you need help with your art, use the link in the description. Thank you everyone. Have a beautiful day.